Good evening, wherever you're watching this, multi-streaming on LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube. I am so glad to be here tonight. You probably know this face. It's Raw School of HR Girlfriends, and I have an amazing guest tonight. And my guest is Lina Graves. And the reason Lina and I are having this conversation tonight is because, unbeknownst to us, it's really timely. There are lots of people that are dealing with COVID-19, and there's so many prongs to this pandemic, so many, whether it's the conversation around entrepreneurship and whether or not those types of businesses can sustain, whether or not you should rely solely on the income of a full-time corporate job, and what sense does that make? But then also, do you stop developing yourself professionally because we're here now, and should we not be thinking about what's ahead? So Lina and I are going to talk, but I'm going to tell you a little bit about Lina and then we'll get started. So Lina has served as an HR leader for nearly 20 years. Early in her career, she founded a consultant agency, ISE Group, where she provided organizations with HR support with a dynamic focus on workplace culture. She is the brains behind Culture Connects, which is a company dedicated to bringing professionals together to have open and sincere discussions about workplace culture in a way of conferences, local networking events, and online webinars throughout the year. In fact, Culture Next is gearing up for an October conference, and all things not being the same as it is today is happening. So welcome, Lina.
Thank you so much. Super excited to be here. You're absolutely right. When we plan on having this discussion, we had no idea of what was coming our way a few weeks after we booked this. So definitely excited to be here and really just trying to put some perspective in our mission right now at Culture Connects. And my mission personally is to see how many people can we help throughout this very rapid transition. You know, normally when you have strategies or things that you are planning on doing and change it, you talk about it for months. You put plans, you do trial and error, you do it in small bites, you do so many different things. And here we are where Friday, a week ago, Friday, we thought, okay, you know, this is going to be manageable and all is going to be good. And then we woke up a couple of days later and our world has changed. And that's just not for HR professionals in particular, it's for everyone, every industry, every single individual. And I think that's what's unique about the situation that we're in today, because we faced weather issues, you know, storms and tornadoes and fires and all of these other things that are pretty scary. But then there's always other communities that can come to your rescue, so to speak, to help you manage through all of that. I think we all got thrown into this rapid fire to do something fairly quickly. And here we are. I think a lot of people are trying to figure out how to navigate. And I love the fact that we're doing things such as this live feed or Zoom meetings, or so many people that are coming together to try to help each other out. I'm super excited to be a part of any particular forum that is out there trying to help everybody out.
Yeah, me too. I mean, you know, I've definitely had more dedicated time without the luxury of moving around to get a lot of wish list projects done, projects I didn't know were wish lists, but they became priority. And so I really want to take you to a place, Lina, where we talk about sort of, you have this HR background in corporate America, you have entrepreneurship, so you know both sides. And I want you to walk me through your journey from corporate to entrepreneurship and then back, and talk to us a little bit about those lessons, those bumps.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's very interesting. I was having a conversation with someone earlier, and the question was like, how do you do both? Because currently I serve as a chief people officer for Hirschfeld Properties, is a property management and real estate development based out of New York, and then I also have Culture Connects, which is sort of my side baby. And definitely an interesting journey. I've been working as an HR professional, as you said, for nearly 20 years. I'm extremely passionate about HR. I'm an HR nerd, as some people probably may want to call it. But more importantly, outside of knowing employment laws, processes, and policies and procedures, one of the things that I've always been extremely passionate about is culture. And culture in the sense of, how does a company culture affect the way that people feel emotionally and how they are connected to the organization that they work for. And so that journey has always taken me to sort of being, I call myself a fixer, and that naturally takes me into the consultant side of the business, where I've gone to an organization, whether I was an employee or came in as a consultant. I go in and look at things and see how I can help organizations improve. I've learned throughout my career in HR that when it comes to processes, there could always be a million different ways to do things that could be better or worse or indifferent or similar. But at the end of the day, one of the things that has always gotten my attention very up close and personal is that you can fix all of the technical things that you want, but if you don't have good workplace culture, then all of those things become irrelevant. People will learn a new way of doing things, but the culture doesn't change. Therefore, it doesn't really improve, other than you may have a little bit of a more efficient process. But if people are not feeling that passion for the organization that they work with and for, then it doesn't make a difference. And that's what took me to that consulting side, and just kind of being able to live in both worlds, which is where I sit today, having a full-time job while trying to run my own business at the same time. It doesn't happen unless you have excellence in your workplace culture. My CEO absolutely supports my passion for being an entrepreneur. And, you know, anytime I have a conversation with him, the first question he's asking before we even talk about business is, how is the conference going? Are people signing up for it? You know, those are the things that you talk about when it relates to culture. And it always takes me back to that desire to help others with culture. And for probably at least 7 years, I've been talking about, I would love to see an event that is fully dedicated to culture. I attend conferences. I obviously love attending the Charm conferences, and I'm actually scheduled to speak at Charm Talent now virtually next month. And they're extremely important, but I wanted an event that was 100% focused on workplace culture. And I keep hoping for somebody to navigate that route so I could join. And eventually I said, okay. So I've been planning and I've been talking about this for long enough. And now that I have the support of the company that I work for to do that, I'm going to go for it. And I did. And I launched Culture Connects last summer. And now we are planning this event that hopefully happens still live in the fall. And that's when we're going to bring all of the culture geeks in form of not only HR professionals, but also the operators of the business to understand what it really is like to have, you know, you can have culture. Culture itself could be good, bad, or indifferent, or nobody cares about the culture, but what it really is like to have good workplace culture, and how to connect the dots and how to get there, and how to have those open and honest conversations that are usually uncomfortable for people to have as it relates to their company culture.
Absolutely. And there's something that you said that I think is so powerful. When I started HR Girlfriends, I worked for 2 different companies, where I started HR Girlfriends at one company, moved on to a former company. So I was back at familiar grounds. And the key to the growth of the community, my passion, my baby, my thing, was supportive leadership. That they understood what they were getting from me as their lead HR professional. They knew that I took my job seriously, and my outside passions did not threaten them. And I think that's an old mindset, to assume that just because you don't know doesn't mean it's not happening. You know, I think from a culture perspective, I want to know what people are doing outside of work. You know,
Absolutely.
how can we support them? You know, if somebody's doing a cupcake bake-off because they are an amazing baker, you want to support them. You want to communicate that. That's, to me, one of the easy wins around culture. What do you think?
Well, I think you said something very key in that whole thing. Just because you don't know, it doesn't mean it's not happening, right? And so the reason why the name of my company is Culture Connects is because that is what is intended to say is that next level of connection with people.
Mhm.
When you get to know your people at a deeper level, and when you support them at everything that they do, here's one thing I strongly believe in. When you support your employees for who they are at work and what they can produce at work, that's great. That's awesome. That's what you're there to do as a leader. But when you support them beyond that, and when you care about them as people outside of anything that they can contribute to your organization, that's when you're reaching that next level of connection. That's when you're having conversations about what else do you enjoy doing outside of what you do here, whether it's a side business, whether it's a hobby, whether it's about their family, children. When you have that level of connection with people, they are very much loyal to you. I absolutely love the group of people that I work with in my what I call my daytime job. And I'm so dedicated, and I'll work any number of hours. Right now, we're working extra hours into the any time of the night because that's what's necessary. And I would never let that falter because those are the people who are supporting my side business to be what it is. And whether it's a side business or whether it's a hobby or whether it's somebody who's got family members with healthcare issues that is distracting their attention from work, the minute that you have that level of connection with your employees, where you're caring for them for anything that is outside of the organization and outside of what they can produce for you, that's when you get that level of loyalty where people are always going to be connected to you at a different level. And I believe when people ask me about workplace culture and what that means to me, it's a feeling. It's a level of connection that you have with your organization. It's not just overnight. You do a couple of celebrations and a couple of parties, and there you go. I have culture. It is a behavior. It is how people develop habits every day and how you communicate with people. And from a leadership perspective, when you reach that level with your employees, I can promise you they're not going anywhere, even when other people down the street maybe offer them a few bucks more to come to work, because they really learn to appreciate how you support them as individuals.
Absolutely. And you make it really hard for the next company to swoop up your talent, right? And that's a good thing. When someone is battling or ignoring recruiters because they got it so good where you are, that's the problem you want to have.
Yeah.
And, I think for me, one of the best examples that I always like lean on is SHRM had a conference several years ago in rotation, and it was in Vegas. And I was able to do the tour of the Zappos facility. Tony Hsieh was speaking, and then they offered free tours. And so I hopped on the shuttle and I went to this tour at Zappos, and I was blown away. And then as you start learning the story of how, Zappos started in San Francisco, and they took more than 50% of their staff were willing to move with them to Las Vegas. Think
Amazing.
about that, right? Like, sure, cost of living is cheaper, things of that nature, but that's not enough to get people to uproot their husbands, wives, and children. It's just not. And
Absolutely.
so, right, they moved with them. And I love the fact that they have a full-time coach on staff that coaches people. And we're talking about the customer service people that pick up the phone when you have trouble with your shoes. The truth is the trajectory of those individuals isn't going to be Tony's position. And they get that. They just want to support them while they're there to be the best that they can be, and coach them into the resources and places that they want while they're there. And that's amazing.
Yeah. That's just something that you can't match. And when I talk to a lot of companies, and when we're talking about turnover and why people are leaving and all of these conversations, often what I hear back is, well, we can't, let's talk about healthcare, because a big part of my career was in healthcare. So nurses and CNAs and, those jobs are very competitive. They're hard to find. They're difficult to fill. And often when I have conversations with leaders, they always tell me, well, we're not paying our people enough. So person down the street is giving them $2 more an hour to start, or this $500 sign-on bonus or whatever, right?
Yeah.
The numbers up. At the end of the day, the truth is that if you do have that level of connection that you are describing from Zappos or from other companies who do this really well, those people are not even willing to look at that. They're not even interested, but you have to be intentional about it. It can't be in the way of temporary rewards. And what I mean by that is, when I talk to people about culture and I try to understand what their company culture is, people always tend to go towards the things that they do, such as, birthday cakes of the month or pizza
parties.
Yeah, well, or we do the holiday celebration, or we do the annual summer picnic or whatever. And so anytime that you think about culture, and I say this to anyone that I consult with, I tell them, I'll save you a lot of money. You don't have to bring me on to help you with this. I'll save you all the fees, and I might be talking myself out of a gig here, but I'll give you a pointer. If you keep thinking about culture as a temporary reward and as a short-term solution, then that's what it becomes. It's a short-term gain, right? If you think that if you have a pizza party or a birthday of the month or all those things that we absolutely want to do and continue doing, but if you think that that's what builds your culture, then you're pushing on instant gratification. And what happens with instant gratification, we always want more, right? We always want the better phone. We always want the better computer. We want the better car. If we get a new job and we make a little bit more money, then we'll probably buy a bigger house. And instant gratification things are intended to be instant gratification. And as quickly as they come, it's as quickly as they go. So when you treat your company culture as something that you give people in terms of monetary gratification or the parties or those kinds of things, then that's exactly what happens. You have that instant reaction of happiness, but it immediately goes away. And guess what? People aren't remembering when you had those picnics or pizza parties or whatever, but what they are remembering is that you got to know them so well in a personal level that when their child was having a special event and they came back to work that following Monday, you asked them how was their child's recital, or if somebody was sick in the family and you know them well enough to be so invested in their time, and you checking up on them and say, how are things going with you? Or during a crisis like the one we're having right now, when you talk to your employees, don't go right into, is your virtual connection working? Are you able to, how many emails are you getting, or whatever work-related items might be, but how are you doing?
Yeah.
This emotional trying time for every single individual in our country and across the globe. So if we change our mentality from what can you do for us to what can we do for you, that connection with your employees immediately changes. And then we go from treating culture as a temporary thing, and we treat it then as a permanent ongoing thing that we will continue to work towards on a daily basis. And I think it's a game changer. And you have companies like Disney World or Zappos or Southwest or, those companies who do it really well, who have proven time and time again that it's not about the dollar amount and it's not about the pizza parties. It's about how people feel and how they are connected to their organization.
I can tell that you're super passionate about culture. I am too, but it's interesting when you get with your peers and everyone has their perspective and their angle, but I love it because that is so true. And so you have this passion for culture and you've been working in HR, and now you have this entrepreneurial journey through Culture Connects. And so tell me how you sought to fill the gap that you were waiting for someone else to fill. And what is that now morphing into?
So it really came down to, I was in between in my career. I was trying to make a career choice of accepting one job versus the other. And in addition to that, I will not accept any of these jobs. And I truly just embark into this journey of Culture Connects. Being the super planner that I am, the thought of being out on my own completely and feeling like that was potentially going to bring some stress into my life, I said, okay, so maybe the best avenue for me to do this is if I could still do both. And it really, the opportunity, the company that I work for right now, it just came overnight. It just came at a time where I was ready to accept another opportunity. And when I talked to them, they were fully supportive of this other thing that I wanted to do. And I said, the time is now. And I went full on with it. It was a scary thought to just embark into the journey of the potential, all the what ifs that entrepreneurs have to deal with. What if no one shows up to the conference, right? What if this happens? What if I can secure sponsors or speakers? Is the first event, and how are people going to trust me that this is actually going to work, being that is the first event, right? People always want data to back up what you're doing. Yeah. And, but I decided that I was not going to let all of those what ifs get in the way of the good, because I really believe that this was going to be for a purpose of creating better work environments at the end of the day, leading to creating just kinder, softer environments where people feel truly connected to their organizations. And so I went for it last summer, and I'm just so humbled to get the response that I'm getting, not only from participants at the conference, but even my biggest concern was always, how am I going to get speakers to this event? People are going to be like, okay, it's your first event, how is that going to work? And I went full force, and here I am today. I get daily emails from people who want to speak at the conference, and I'm having to be selective on the people who are going to be part of the conference. And that's just, a 7-month journey to this point. So that's a very short period of time to be saying something like that and still be in the first event. And so now there is no looking back. I'm in this journey, and I'm supported by so many people, so many companies, and so many individuals. It's crazy to think that just 6 months ago, when I looked at my LinkedIn page, I had less than 300 connections because I wasn't all that active on LinkedIn. And here, fast forward to today, and I have almost 11,000 connections on my LinkedIn page, and requests every day that are coming in, and people wanting to be part of this event. And it's extremely humbling and super exciting for sure.
Yeah, listen, I know that feeling. I remember before starting HR Girlfriends, I wasn't even a member of my local SHRM chapter. I had just finished graduate school maybe 2 years prior, and I was a non-traditional, graduate student, so it wasn't straight out of undergrad, but I had had a career prior. So I was in this weird space, and the beauty of passion projects or things that you're drawn to and really, really designed for you are that everything falls in place. I mean, there are days when I'm like, I could hang it up. I called it Pandora's box. I've gone through these moments since 2013 where I'm like, oh my God, it's so tough. I wish there were 4 of me, but it's so easy for me to get back on the saddle once I've had my moments, because this is what I'm supposed to be doing. And I think that's true for a lot of people. Everyone knows that HR in itself can be a lonely place for some because of our role. And it can also be one of the most stressful positions behind your C-suite. And it's tough, but the love of what we do and how we impact lives brings you back every day.
Absolutely. That's my mentality behind this mission. At the end of the day, a lot of people that I have conversations with ask me, how are you running this business? And this is a huge event, and there is so much that goes with it. And I think that to my benefit, I because I do have a full-time job and that keeps me focused and doing what I need to do day in and day out, I have failed in a positive way to look at HR Connects as a business. I look at it as a mission, right? My mission is I need to get the word out there. I need to connect people with one another who are interested in better workplace culture, but they just simply don't know how to get there. Part of the things that we're doing with the conference is that we're providing people with, we're doing a pre-conference climate temperature check as far as the company culture. And then we're providing the attendees with a roadmap that is going to take them from here is where you thought you were, here's where you really are, one way or another.
Yeah.
Here are the number of tools. Here is the roadmap to get you to where you want to be. And here are all the partners that might be able to help you through that journey. And I think that the fact that I see that as a mission rather than a business just puts me in a good position, because when I'm having conversations with potential sponsors, attendees, or speakers, or anyone who is supporting the event, I'm really being sincere, and I'm being my true self, where I said, this is the mission that I have. At the end of the day, my mission goes towards creating a kinder world, one company at a time. And I love for anyone who wants to be a part of it to join me in that journey, but I'm not letting anything get in the middle of that. And it definitely brings a different perspective, because I'm doing it out of pure passion. And I've owned other businesses. My husband and I own restaurants and bars and all of this other thing. And that's a whole different thought that goes behind that. This is truly a passion that I could work 24 hours in a day and want to continue going. And my husband tells me, woman, you have got to go to sleep.
I know the
but it creates a different level of energy, because you can visualize that end result. And for me, that end result is having companies who come to the event return the following year, showing all of the different things that they have implemented with their organizations and how it's changing the culture. And at the end of the day, when you're changing the culture, you changing the way that your employees feel day in and day out when they come to work. You're creating that enjoyable environment, and then you're creating happier people. And that's what leads to a kinder world at the end of the day. And so who's not going to be passionate about what the outcome is going to be on the other end?
Absolutely. And, I'll put a couple of plugs. I really hope, one, that this is successful. I really, really do, because this is a needed addition to our toolbox around culture. But, I would love to see some things, as you develop, like maybe teaching people how to navigate focus groups so that they understand how to garner the data. I know that that's a big one. So I'm looking forward to so many, things that will come out of your conference, because, as we look at what is expected of HR and then what we're actually up against and where our capabilities are, there's such a divide. And I'm really hoping that leadership from those companies find value and come into Culture Connects as well. Because, what I'm finding is that the new way of getting things done in HR is bring a leader with you, bring a barrier, i.e. a decision maker above you with you. I did a journey mapping exercise course seminar, and there was an insurance company, pretty decent size, maybe almost 1,000 people out of Pennsylvania. They had their marketing director and their HR director at this journey mapping exercise that was really focused on HR people, looking at your processes from a higher level. And I thought it was an interesting combination. And when I thought about it, and when I talked to them, they said, yeah, well, marketing communicates to the external, we communicate to the internal, and recruitment may seem like it's mine, but it's ours, right? And so, yeah, and it's important that marketing understand the pieces to the puzzle and how people get here. So I just thought it was an awesome duo, and so I'm hoping that we get more duos and trios and quads at your conference.
Well, that's the plan, right? One of the conversations, I had the opportunity to meet with Johnny Taylor, not last week, but the week before, as he's going to be one of the speakers at the conference. And we're talking about how to bridge that gap in that mentality of people thinking that culture is the job of HR, right? A lot of people naturally relate culture to HR, but to bring those duos and those, different groups of people from the organization, you have to have that mentality. The culture is the job of 100% of the people in the organization. And certainly HR can be the driver of that train. And by default and by personality types, we tend to be the people who embark in that journey of leadership of culture. But at the end of the day, you can have the best HR person out there driving culture, and if the rest of the leaders are not on board with you, then you're not going anywhere, because it all becomes talk and it becomes the core values that we put on a pretty bulletin board at the front, not really taking action on. So I think that part of what this event is going to be like, and the reason why it's important that we bring not only HR professionals, but the operators and the C-level executives to have this discussion, is so we can have those potentially uncomfortable discussions about where are we crashing with one another. As HR professionals, I'm sure you face this, and in some of your peers and other people that you work with, is that, well, maybe we won't tell HR until this is done because, they might tell us we can't do it, right? And so how do we start breaking down those barriers so we can come together as it relates to culture, and how we do, to your example, the marketing and the recruitment piece, and connecting the fact that all those things need to come together. How do we break down those barriers so that the HR professionals, perhaps sometimes we get a little strict with the rules, and sometimes we just read the books for too long and we forget about the fact that, we need to do culture in business. And then how do we then bring the other part of the business, the C-suite executives and the operators of the business, to understand what we're up against and how we're trying to balance it all together, but really just having those open conversations about the fact that, hey, you know what, we can raise our hands and say every once in a while, you know what, maybe I'm focusing too much on what's on the book, and maybe I need to focus on the people side of the business, and how do we balance this out? And then on the other hand, having those partners who really agree and understand the fact that culture is not the job of the lonely HR department or lonely HR person. Culture is the job of every single individual in the organization, from your middle level, every employee for that matter, but from a leadership perspective, if your middle level managers are not out there promoting the culture that you are promoting from the C-suite level, then you're also creating silo cultures where they're creating their own environment, whatever that may be. And it could be good, bad, or indifferent, but it doesn't relate to the rest of the organization. And so that connection between all aspects of the organization, that's what we're really going for when we go to this event and we have the conversations about how to get every single leader on board with what culture looks like, and how do we eliminate the idea of people saying, hey, we're going to put up with this person who may not be so nice and so kind in the way they treat people, but they're a great producer for the company. So you know what? It's just person, we're just gonna let that person be who they are. But how do we step up and say, you know what? We're not gonna accept that from anyone, regardless of how much you can produce for your organization. That's a huge statement that you make to your people.
Absolutely. It's so interesting. I have this saying, or collection of sort of phrases. It's really about the managers. Typically organizations put someone in place to be a manager to substantiate salary, right? But they're typically the subject matter expert. They're not the manager of people. They're the manager of processes, of the thing that made them attractive to you. And when you give the, biophysicist 5 people to manage, so that you can substantiate that person's salary, or that the org chart makes sense to your eyes, you really begin to tear away at the culture, because that doesn't make sense. It may make sense for another company. It may make sense for another department, but you've got to look at the totality of it all. And I really want more companies to see that if you start giving management level folks people to manage, to substantiate salary and other things that are on the table, no matter what you do around culture, people, what do they say? People leave their bosses, not their company.
Correct.
It's like you have to look at culture so much bigger. It's how they feel when they walk down your halls. It's also, can I talk to my manager? Is my manager the type of person that advocates for me? When my manager says they're advocating, can I trust them?
Right. Well, and so that's such a perfect example, because we have the conversation of promoting somebody who is a subject matter expert, right? We tend to do that because this person knows this process best. It doesn't matter what industry we're in. I've had this conversation with people in so many different industries, I can't even begin to mention. And we all know that just because you're the best nurse, you're not the best charge nurse who is now ready to manage people. We all know that because you're the best IT analyst, you're now shouldn't be the IT director who's managing a group of people. But as much as we know this, we're failing people left and right because we continue that trend. We continue that path where the person who is the best or the most productive or the most expert at this particular thing always tends to be the person who ends up being promoted into a job. And while that's great that companies are trying to promote people, we are setting people up to fail because number one, not everyone wants to be a manager. Let's start by that. Number two, if they do want to be a manager, then we have that responsibility to provide them with the proper tools to be able to do that before they get there, not while they're in it, but before they get there. So if you're doing proper succession planning and you're bringing people up to speed on what it is like to be a manager, then you give them small pieces. You know, you try that, trying things out first before you put people in that position, because then once they get to that point and they fail, often they fail because we set them up for failure. We didn't provide them with the proper tools. And so it's having those conversations, and from an HR perspective, as an HR professional, having those conversations with our managers when they're coming to us saying, hey, we want to promote this person to a manager role. We want to have that conversation about how did you prepare this person to become a manager? And do they really know what it's like? Or do they even want to be? How often do managers come to HR and tell you, hey, we're going to promote this person to be a manager of this department? The individual has no idea. We haven't even had a conversation whether or not that's a path they may want to follow. What if they just are comfortable where they are and they might be very good at what they do and being a manager is not in the cards for them, but then they feel pressure to do it because if they don't, what is that going to look like for them? And this is the part of knowing our employees really, really well beyond the day in and day out work that they do, so that we know exactly where they stand. So we had those conversations with them about where is it that your career path is taking you? Are you happy where you are? Do you want to go further than that? And where is it that you want to go? Not where I want to put you, but where do you want to go?
And that's so critical. I mean, seriously. So, you know, I'm curious, the question just hit my mind and I don't want to forget it. But my question is what is your ultimate goal with Culture Connects? Like, what do you see it looking like in 5 years?
I love that. So absolutely. What I see Culture Connects doing is setting up organizations in a path to excellence and culture, in a path where those employees can say what the Zappos employees say, regardless of the size of your company, whether you have a company with 50 people or 5,000 people. How do we do culture for companies who are in other parts of the country, spread out all over the country and all of that? And what are companies going to say? Those organizations that are coming to the event, what are they going to say year one and year two? What is the culture of the organization look like today? Because they took those tools with them back to their organization and they actually implemented. One of the things that I often see happen when people go to conferences is there is a lot of good information that comes out of it. Great speakers, a lot of information, but often people tend to leave events like that, like deer in headlights, not knowing where do I go and how do I even begin to implement this. So some of the things that we're doing at the conference is we're tailoring the breakout sessions to your company size. So you're not going to be having a person who works for a company with 80,000 people giving guidance to a person with a 200-person company, 200 employee company on how to do culture because the information isn't relatable. So what I see in 5 years, Culture Connects, number one, I see this growing because I see everyone needing development of culture. I work for a small company today, and what our culture is today versus what it was 7 months ago, there are great leaders, but from an HR perspective, we weren't driving culture. We were just, historically, we were just being, you know, the people who completed the paperwork before the department developed into being what it is today. So I see the conference being that event that really opens our eyes and our hearts, more importantly, to what the company culture needs to look like. And as this event continues to grow, I see people truly creating those better work environments where everybody can say, you know what, I feel confident that my people are going to stay here, even if the person down the street is going to pay them whatever, much more money a year or an hour or whatever the case might be, because we have developed that culture of being connected with our employees and really truly being present for them.
Right. So I want to take you to a place, and I want to be safe about it because I don't want you to name call. But, I know why I started HR Girlfriends. My story is pretty succinct. I know what I was missing. And I know you talked about the fact that, you saw that there was a gap and you were waiting for someone to fill it. And then you decided to do it yourself. But there's always the one company where you had enough. So tell me about the experience versus obviously identifying the company, but what was the tipping point for you that drove you in to Culture Connects?
That's a great question. So interestingly enough, this is a company where there was a leader with great intentions of leading the organization into what, in my opinion anyway, good culture would be like. But it was a leader who was sitting alone in this whole culture push, right? And everybody was out doing their own thing. And there is this one individual trying to bring people together, trying to truly provide an environment where employees felt safe going to their leaders, their immediate direct leaders, to talk about any concerns or issues or that type of thing. But it seemed that for some reason, the rest of the organization was driving their own mission. And I just don't think this person was ever given the opportunity to truly get to where they were trying to go. And it was pretty sad. I mean, even from an HR perspective, as being a person who was observant as a consultant type of individual, I've had so many conversations with so many people where they said they just didn't feel safe having a conversation with their direct leader. And that's a huge statement. If you think about psychological safety, we are grown adults. If we are fearful of another human being that it's also an adult, that's a pretty big thing. And when people came to me and said, we just don't feel safe approaching our leader, and that was a consistent message that many people in different departments, not just within HR groups or that type of environment, but within many different departments of the organization, it was a consistent message where people did not feel safe when they brought things up to their managers. And it was their impression, good, bad, or indifferent, that when people did bring things up, they somehow ended up not being with the company anymore, or being demoted or whatever. So many different scenarios that could happen. And I think that the key point that I took with me is we need our people globally to feel safe at work. And we need our people globally to not feel bullied by a manager. We need our people to come to work and not be nervous that, God forbid, if they overslept one day, what kind of story do I have to make up about a flat tire or a daycare problem or whatever, instead of being able to be sincere and say, you know what, I'm sorry, I overslept today. And if they oversleep every day, then you have a different conversation. But at the end of the day, creating that environment where people truly feel safe. I think that was when this individual, I had multiple conversations, but this one person just described it to me as not feeling safe when they talk to their managers. That was huge for me. That was a huge eye opener. And I wanted to be vocal about that because I wanted to tell people that it's not okay for grown adults not to feel safe at the place where they work. That is, we teach our kids not to bully, right? As parents, as individuals, we get appalled when we hear stories about children bullying other children at school. And then we go to work and we have bullies at work. It's just not okay. And I think that was a huge eye opener for me to say, I need to start this conversation. I need to make sure that people are hearing these stories so they understand the impact that they're having. I had an employee who said to me, every time I'm going to write an email to my manager, I sit there and I read it for over an hour. Change it. So think about productivity, right? We're trying to create productive environments while people are feeling safe. You have an employee saying, I reread these emails to my manager for over an hour before I send it because I always feel like some way, somehow I'm going to get in trouble for it. Killing productivity. If you worry about productivity, there you have it. Mm-hmm. Sitting there typing an email and changing it 100 times before hitting send and feeling terrified when they hit send button, just not knowing what's going to come back. That's a pretty impactful thing. Think about, what are you doing to your organization? You're having people who are sitting there debating whether or not what they're trying to communicate is acceptable to whatever that perception of the recipient is going to be. And to have somebody who said, I spent over an hour looking at emails, that was just one of the craziest things I've ever heard. And that's why I wanted to be vocal about it, and I wanted to be open about it, because I want people to feel safe when they come to work every day.
Absolutely. I mean, I don't want to be affiliated with an organization that doesn't have a healthy margin for error. Because a healthy margin for error means that when people err, because we're human and we will, that there is a safe place to land. That's healthy, right? And so when someone can't call you and say, and the interesting part is that we already are challenged with women coming to communication platforms with bosses and peers very differently because of our perception and the way things are with women and the dynamic. So we're giving you the whole life story about the trained arm coming down and the kid threw up and the this and that, right? We're giving you way too much, which many times is true, but then you battle that with the fear, right? And so I had to teach myself, when I started HR Girlfriends, it forced me to start embodying things that I was communicating to others. I couldn't say negotiate for yourself and I was somewhere being a chicken. It didn't mean that I was accomplishing everything, meaning I would go after it. And if it was successful, great. If it wasn't, then I had a story to tell that had another coin to flip on the other side. But I was like, I am no longer going to call, even if my boss is psycho or whatever the problem is. I'm not going to tell you a million things. I'm going to say, I'm running late. My apologies. I'll be there at 11. Because truthfully, you don't care about all the instances anyway.
Correct.
And it's spinning my psychology in an uproar. My cortisone levels are up and all kinds of crazy. So I definitely feel like there's so many things at play in our organizations, and the fact that we're human. You're absolutely human. And you may be looking at a 40-year-old John, but it could be 7-year-old John that is showing up for you. And
Absolutely.
we're not psychologists and we're not therapists, but when you have a healthy margin for error, you go back and you say, John, you're having an issue. Something's happening. I don't know what it is, but we care enough about you to say, we don't want this to continue.
Right.
But we need you to go and embark on the journey to figuring that out. Because if you want to be here, we want you here, but you can't be here like this.
Well, I love what you just shared, because talking about creating safe environments, I was, as the HR professional that I am, my husband usually comes to me for obviously HR advice, even though he has an amazing HR team. But I was listening to one of his calls. We don't spend a lot of time together. This is new for us. Both of us travel a lot for work. So this is actually the first week in several years that we're both home at the same time during the week. But anyway, I was listening to one of his calls by accident. We were driving somewhere and he had to get on a call. And the call, he had it on speaker, and the call started with him telling his team about something that one of the other employees had done, to a mistake that this person had made. And I'm just losing my mind. I'm like, what are you doing? I'm so disappointed in him at this point in time. I'm driving the car and I'm making eye contact with him. And then he suddenly says, Lina's about to kill me. And of course they know who Lina is. To not make this story too long, they actually created this environment when they do their weekly. It's a safe group of people. It's a small confined group of people. It probably like 8 or so of them in the leadership group. And they start the call by sharing each other's mistakes in such a safe place that is not throwing somebody out under the bus in front of everybody. Is other people coming together and said, oh yeah, I had something similar like that happen to me, and here's how I addressed it. And they actually created this such safe environment where they actually get to correct the mistake, but also laugh it off and say, oh my gosh, can't believe you did that. But it's a control, safe space where they go from sharing their mistakes to sharing the successes, and say how the successes always just are most definitely most of the times on top of it. And at the end of that conversation, I was so proud of him, because I started being so mad at him. I'm like, how are you saying this in front of a group of people? You're out of your mind. You know better than to be doing that. To now I got the reason why he was doing it. And I was like, that is an amazing strategy where people feel safe. They raised their own hands in a group setting and said, oh, you know what? I did this week, or I put whatever this.
Because he raises his hand first, right? It's like,
Correct.
you lead by example. And so if the person who is driving the bus and signing the checks is like, I made a mistake, listen, or I blundered this thing, and in hindsight, I would have done it differently. You then have an example, and you know that it's okay, and that your husband's not walking around perfect. And that's okay. And I think that that's amazing, in terms of that. So I have a question for you as we wind down, because we've talked about so many things: entrepreneurship, culture, your ventures, your journey. What advice do you have for someone in HR who has a passion for, I don't know, culture, or has a passion for women in HR like I do, and they are thinking about birthing something like what we've done? What advice would you give them?
I think the number one thing I would say, and this coming from me, being that I'm the super planner and I have to have the list of things going, is definitely interesting for me to say that. But I think the number one thing I would say is, don't stress yourself out with what it's going to look like, what the end result is going to look like. Clearly, we have to have a plan. We have to have an idea of what we're trying to accomplish. But at the end of the day, I think that as HR professionals, we tend to be the people who we want to have a crystal ball into the end result. And I'm definitely one of those people. And then we fail to enjoy the journey. So if making that decision of going for something, this was a very hard decision for me to make. This was years in the making, because that list just kept growing. And then the larger the list got, the more excuses I gave myself as to, it's too hard. There is way too much to do. There is no way I'm going to be able to do it. And so if I look at it from this perspective now, I didn't need to have the full on exactly crystal ball of what that day was going to look like when I put this event together. I needed to have a good plan and a good execution for it. But at the end of the day, trying to enjoy that journey, because the more that we add to that list, the bigger that the monster in our heads get, and the harder that it gets to go through the execution. So that would be the number one thing. And the number two thing is, I honestly believe that once I lost my fear to fail, I was good to go. And when you talk about fear to fail, is one of those things, honestly, I'll be very sincere when I say this. My biggest fear was, if this doesn't work, and I have already exposed myself to that many people telling them this is what I'm doing, and suddenly I'm not doing it anymore because nobody's coming to the event, I'm going to look like a fool, right? That is my biggest fear. And you know what? At the end of the day, who cares, right? Yeah. And it's a hard thing it was a hard thing for me to say, but once I decided to go into this journey, I decided to be very sincere with myself and very sincere with the world. And once I lost that fear of telling people, you know what, I canceled the event because nobody was going to show up, or whatever, whatever number of reasons why it didn't work out.
Right.
Fear, and I was able to be sincere, and I knew that I had so many people supporting me, whether the event was successful or not, then I was okay. And I think that in a way, it's a little vain of us as humans, where we love to advertise everything that's successful. We love to tell people we got a new job. We love to tell people we bought a new house, or whatever. Anything that's positive and good, we love to tell people about. But we tend to hide when our kids are not doing so great at school, or, you know, we lost the job for one reason or another. Those are things that we don't go out and tell the world about. And I think that we are creating that environment where everybody's seeing everybody's successes, and therefore we're missing on the importance of the failures because we're not advertising those. And so one commitment that I made to myself is that I was going to be very sincere in this journey, successful or not. I was full in. And if it didn't work, I was going to go out and tell the world, you know what, I still have a lot of passion for this. It didn't work this time. I'm going to make some adjustments and I'm going to go at it again. Because to me, the failure only defines you when you decide that, you know, I'm not going to try it again because it didn't work out for me this time. And once you lose that fear, you just go with it. You just go with the flow.
And it's a journey, you know. And so, you know, when you talk about, you know, the fear of failure and losing it, when you think about the journey to get there, all of the internal dialogue that's occurring and the external dialogue and the bouncing things off of, and that's why I try my best to be as transparent in my HR career journey and my entrepreneurial journey, because I always tell people the honest truth. I didn't know what I was doing with HR girlfriends. Like I had when I say no idea, zero. All I knew is I wanted to connect with my peers. And that was all I had. I wasn't sure if it was just going to be a community feel-good thing and what it would morph to, but I knew I was passionate about my own career. And as I developed more of a sense of, okay, this is the direction, I had some bumps. I remember planning these events, happy hours and things, or networking events. And in my mind, the room should have been filled with people, you know, because that's what you envision success as. Mm-hmm. My success was if people packed the room, then that was successful. And I had to listen, because one of my favorite sayings is what you resist will persist. So initially I was resisting the fact that it's not a numbers game with what you're doing. In fact, that's counter to what you said you wanted to do. You said you wanted to build quality relationships amongst the vast majority of HR practitioners, which happen to be women. You want to build authenticity. You cannot build authenticity in a room full of 150 people at a networking event. You could try, but then, so after I stopped resisting it, it became so clear to me. Then I started going, okay, quality over quantity. And then no matter what the number was, I'd be so shocked when rooms would be filled with more than 50, 60 people. I'm like, look, right, this is the woman 2013 who wanted more than 100 or whatever. Now I'm going, oh, that's too many. Or when they ask me about what number I want to limit, I'm like 25, 30. That's manageable. So it's a journey in itself. And even in our HR careers, making sure that we're real and we're kind to ourselves, and that no matter what we envision for our journey, it is going to do exactly what it's going to do. And our job is to show up, be present, to do our very best, to take cues, to keep our emotional intelligence on as high as possible, and to really manage that process. So I'm glad to hear you talk about that.
Yeah, it was definitely, it was a way for me to awaken myself to enjoying the process, enjoying the journey without the constant stress of what if. Once I started enjoying that journey, and once I started being, okay, you know what, like you said, if only this many people show up, then, you know, at the beginning, I used to tell my husband, I was like, you know, it's going to be me and you speaking to 2 or 3 people sitting in the audience, because those panic moments. And to be very real about that. You know, one of the things that I've always said to him, I said, we would be foolish to sit there and say, hey, I don't wake up in the middle of the night to this date, and I'm sure to the day of the conference and beyond, in a panic on what's happening. But you have to be real to yourself, and you have to troubleshoot and talk yourself into, why did you start doing this in the first place? And with the mission of it being creating a kinder world, one company at a time, I can't go wrong with that mission. Even if I have 10 people, 10 people that I can help be kinder, that's a good day for me. Any number of people that I can have an impact is a good day for me. And once I started changing my mentality and just being not being so worried about what other people are going to think if this doesn't work or if this happens, then I started just letting go and just enjoying the process. And it changed the perspective. And suddenly people are reaching out and I'm getting so many requests, and it started happening. What I wanted so desperately to happen, it started happening naturally once I let go of those stressors and that whole, oh my gosh, what's going to happen if this doesn't work?
I know. We could dive into a whole new conversation on that. And you know that, Lina. Just being human beings, independent of the decisions we've made or the jobs we've chosen or the companies we've started, like Culture Connects. But how can everyone find more information about Culture Connects if they're interested in attending?
Absolutely. The website is cultureconnects.com. That's CONNEXT. And then, of course, sending me an email at Lina, Lina, at cultureconnects.com. All of the information is on the website. Of course, those of you who are connected with me on LinkedIn can definitely find a lot of information. I post a lot of information about the conference on my LinkedIn page, speakers and everything that's going on. And then, of course, if you go through Eventbrite, you can also find information about the conference. And I'm very positive to say that we're gonna be in Orlando, Florida at the Gaylord Palms, October 21st through the 23rd. But if we have to make any adjustments due to the current situation, then we will do that too. No matter how it happens, we will get together one way or another and make this an event that is going to help people out a lot.
Absolutely. Well, Lina, it's been a pleasure communicating with you. I know it's kind of interesting when you talk to people briefly on LinkedIn and having this hour-long conversation. I'm like, oh my God, I want more. And we'll do this again for sure. Maybe as we know what COVID's going to do and we get closer to the conference, we can start talking about some new revelations you've had around culture.
Absolutely. We'll definitely love to do this again. It was such a good time. I can't believe we've been talking for an hour, but thank you.
All right, guys. Thank you so much for joining me tonight. Sana Rasul, Chief Girlfriend at HR Girlfriends. Be sure to take a look at our website, hrgirlfriends.com, where you'll see some really great COVID-19 resources, along with some other useful tools that will help you in your journey navigating our new normal. Talk to you soon.
Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.